Hollywood leading lady Goldie Hawn has been making audiences smile for years. But behind all the Hollywood glitz and glamour is a woman who has one mission: to help those who may not even know her name. Join me as I talk to actress Goldie Hawn as she tells me how her charity, Operation Smile, and her educational programs are literally bringing joy and smiles to children who wouldn't have them otherwise. I'm Dr. Gail Gross. Welcome. My guest today is one of the most popular and recognizable actresses in America. In fact, she's an American icon, Goldie Hawn. You know her from her many movies, including The First Wives Club, Private Benjamin, and she won an Oscar for her very first movie role in Cactus Flower. She has also been recognized for her many humanitarian works, including receiving the Medal of Freedom Award from the Dalai Lama, which I was honored to present to her. She's a beautiful, intelligent, and multi-talented woman, and she's a wonderful role model. She is also the mother of 3 beautiful children, and I am delighted she has joined me today. Welcome, Goldie.
Thank you, Gail.
It's
great to be with you.
You are on a journey to India.
I'm on a journey to the world.
To the world. Tell us where you're going and what you're doing.
Well, right now I'm planning on doing a documentary, sort of a filmed, entertainment-based documentary, In Search of Joy around the world. It's time we started celebrating what's good. We're so inundated with so many negative images and so much fear, and and joy is still alive on the planet, and I just feel compelled to go out and talk to people and witness it and try to be able to say, see, it's there, and find out where joy lives. Of course, I think I have the answer.
What is the answer?
I think that joy lives in here.
Yes.
And there are many wonderful myths and all kinds of data and old texts and things like that that are written that speak about where joy lives. And I know that it's alive and well on this planet, and I think we need to start celebrating it more.
I listened to a speech when the Dalai Lama came to Houston. He spoke at Rice University, and someone asked him out of the audience this very deep question. He said, "Your Holiness, what is the secret to life?" And the Dalai Lama answered with a pause, "Joy, be joyful. That's
Right.
the secret of life."
Right. It is the secret of life, and I think that today, people look at you and go, well, yeah, okay, how do I get there? Mm-hmm. The biggest conundrum today is that, how do we approach our lives, and how do I learn to experience my own personal description of joy, because everybody has a different description of joy. And how do we cultivate it? So His Holiness poses the answers, and of course getting to that for a person is sometimes a journey. So my wish is to be able to investigate all the avenues to joy, all the ways to open up the mind and the heart, and to sort of free us from our shackles of our own sort of reality-based misery that so many of us live in. I know that there's a little flower in our hearts. I really believe that. I know it sounds very idealistic, but I know that when I go deep inside of my heart, I see my flower in there, and I know if I can see it, and I was only a C student.
That just spoke of certain aptitudes. Believe me, that's a very poor monitor. It's not a measure of anything.
No, it isn't.
It's not.
It really is not.
Mm-hmm.
It's this thing. I wasn't somebody who loved school as a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
I just was a dreamer. So I would feel things. I would intuit things, and my life was quite beautiful through my eyes. Although school was sort of left brain, correct?
Exactly.
Sort of linear,
yes.
Memorization, and so forth. So it was very difficult for me to
compartmentalize.
Exactly, and to shift sort of the intuitive into that computer so it would, generate all the data that I needed to generate. So that being a C student, I have a funny story because I know we want to talk some about education.
Yes.
When I was I guess it was in second grade. Well, there's a couple things. One, these are great stories. My mother would tell me stories, we'd laugh. So when I was in second grade, I think, I was really happy because I was in a group called the Purple Balls.
Oh.
And I was the only one in the group. Okay, I was the only one. And I felt so proud to be in the Purple Balls. First, I loved purple. And then I was singular. So my mother one day said, well, why don't you have a reading book? And I said, because I'm in the Purple Balls. So my friend who was next to me, we followed each other because he had 2 sets of teeth and I had to speak for him because his buck teeth and then his other teeth kept
coming through.
So
good friend that you were.
I know. So my mother said, David, why do you have a reading book and Goldie doesn't? And he said, and my mother looked at me and she said, what did he say? He said, because she's too dumb. So my mother got the reading book and taught me to read because I wasn't learning to read in school. But the moral to this story is that I was never made to feel bad because I was not reading as well. And that's where the damage gets done. That's where we can hurt our children by hurting them, by hurting their esteem, by making them feel less than. It does something very damaging to the brain, but more damaging to the heart.
And how incredible that you would really tune into that. And what brought you to that? How did you realize? How did that come into your consciousness?
In terms of when I was a young child, these things don't come into your consciousness in the sense that we're able to witness them. I mean, we're just, starting to witness ourselves at that age, really, and make sort of comparatives and things like that. I had good self-esteem because my mother and father made sure that I did. I was loved and adored and honored, and I loved to dance, and I was given lots of kudos for that. And so I was fortified in the areas that I excelled in extremely well, with a lot of love and caring. And this is the answer. We can't expect our children all to be the same. We can't expect them to excel to the heights of which we would design it to be. We have to look at our children for who they are and nurture the very spark in them that brings them life and excitement about living.
And so you've taken your own life model and really done what all educators try to do, transfer that to others, and in a sense created a curriculum for life, really, integrating joy and the kind of language we use with one another, very similar to your early experience.
Exactly. I mean, it is always nice to hear you're wonderful, then you're bad, or you're ugly, or we don't like you, or we hate you. There are, words have vibration, words have sound, and children today in schools, I think, learn on many levels. And we do have a tendency, because we're competitive by nature, because we want our children to excel, we want our schools to be the best, we want our kids to get in the best schools. So we're losing our way, I think, sometimes in how we approach our children, because they learn on all levels. They learn on the sensory level. They learn how things feel. They get to understand essences. This is what shapes our children. Not just memorization, not just getting in there and saying you have to learn this poem. No, let's feel this poem.
Yes.
Let's experience this. We teach children how to learn and memorize. We really don't teach children how to be.
How to be human.
And how to be human.
Yes, you're exactly right.
I think that it's time now that we sort of all look at this and sort of jump on the bandwagon and say, okay, how are we going to build to our new future? Because, those of us who have this site are able to look at this and say, what can I do? How can I make changes? That is so we can help grow the next, group of humans.
Yes, Thoreau's very famous line, most people live quiet lives of desperation, and yet as a knee-jerk reaction we keep raising kids in the exact same way, instead of bringing into a child the well-roundedness of spirit and academia and philosophy, and making a whole child by teaching them to be.
Exactly. And it is the whole child, it really is, and all children are imbalanced. We're all imbalanced, I mean, the key to, I personally sit quietly every morning. You can call it what you want. You can call it meditation. You can call it
contemplation.
Prayer. You can call it contemplation.
Whatever.
There's no real label to it. but it really is just sitting inside of myself. It's meeting myself. It's being able to sort of shake my hand every morning and sitting quietly and just sort of listening to my own heartbeat and then watching my ideas that come to my mind. And sometimes I pray for others, and sometimes I just let myself be, just let myself exist, just vibrate with the world around me. It sounds all sort of weird, but I challenge anyone to try it. It really is an amazing thing. My dream is, yes, those of us caregivers right now, those people who have reached a certain age who now say, what can I do to give back, or how can I parent properly? Yes, it's important to learn how to cultivate your mind and integrate body and spirit. But with our children, how divine to be able to have them sit for a few moments of quietude to try to see if they can just hear their own heartbeat. What a great exercise, do you know?
Time in instead of time out.
Yeah, time in instead of time out.
It's so true. You just take a child and
Yeah.
say, just stop a minute, go
Yeah.
inside, experience who you are.
Right.
It makes all the difference.
And imagery, and to be able to give those children these amazing images that they live with all the
Yes.
time. I mean, when you think of all of the inundation, everything that we're getting every day, these children, especially the very, very young ones, and also the ones into their teenage years if they're not developed correctly, don't have the process. Even their frontal lobes are not developed yet, okay? So not until they're 20 or 21 do they fully develop.
How savvy of you to really understand the whole process and really, come to the idea that language is so important. You told me a story once about recently about this little boy in Peru that you adopted, and I want to talk about what you did in Peru, that you really went on a humanitarian journey with no recognition, no one even knows but your closest friends that you did it.
Right.
Your great contribution. I mean, I knew people in Peru who are still talking about what you did. And tell us about that. Tell us about Project Smile and what you did with all of these children, and then your particular child, and then how language affected him.
Right. Well, I had an opportunity to visit with Operation Smile, which is a wonderful organization that travels the world, and the doctors give their time, and they help these children, and they sort of configure faces that actually makes these children feel not a part of the world. So it's a beautiful thing that they do. So I decided I'd like to go on this journey with them. So I took Oliver, Boston, Kurt, and Oliver's girlfriend at the time, and we all went down there, and we went into this hospital in Lima, Peru, which there were about 250 children that were there, and they all wanted this operation. And of course they couldn't do everyone, but they'd go back intermittently.
Yes.
So, but there was one little boy there who was 9 years old. He had a very, very, very bad deformity. He had the cleft palate, he couldn't speak, he had a hole in his mouth was all over the place. I mean, it was quite something.
Yes.
But his spirit was so alive. And there he was with some of the nurses that were there, and he opened his arms, and he flew into my arms, and he was the most joyful light I've ever seen. And I heard his story, and his story is that he was a street urchin. He ran away from his parents, who abused him horribly. He spent a year on the streets. I don't know what happened to him on the streets of Peru, but he told me that his nights felt the safest. The police picked him up, they took him into an orphanage. When he was in the orphanage, he saw on television an advertisement for Operation Smile.
Oh, my.
And he said, I want to go there.
Oh.
And the woman, Mercedes, who was taking care of them in this orphanage, said, I'm sorry, but you're a little too old, Juan. He said, no, I want to go. He knew he wanted to fix his face. So she rented a truck, and she drove 3 days to get to Lima. This child shone like a light. Anyway, he ended up being my boy. So I took him in with Kurt and everyone. I put him to sleep in my little lap. He breathed into this thing with all his might, and we did the operation with us there in the room. And after it was over, I said, please let me know what happens to him, because I want to pay for the rest of his operations, because one won't do. He needed 4.
Oh, my.
He could speak, so he could, learn and communicate words. So, as it turned out, it's a kind of a long story, which I won't go into, and kind of a sad story. But anyway, I went down to Lima And I've been working with this angel girl. Her name is Paula. And after lots of work and lawyers and everything else, she has adopted him.
Oh, how
and
wonderful.
he is now living in a beautiful home. He's visited me last summer. He's learning English. I've had 4 operations on him. He's got down on the computer, and I emailed him the other day. And I told him, and you know he has anger bouts. He has a lot of issues with being abused.
Of course.
And we have to work through these. And of course we're working with a psychologist twice a week and so forth. And so I emailed him and I said to him in my email, I love you, I'm so proud of you, you're so handsome and you're so smart. And Paula emailed me and she said, he beamed when he read that. And he went out and he told his friend that he was so handsome and that he was so smart. And this is the power of words.
The power of words, how important, and that you build the self in this child.
Right.
Not just his esteem, but the self.
But the self, exactly.
That's amazing.
That's right. So
what
he
a
could
story.
identify himself to the goodness in him, to trust it, and to know that we love him.
And you've taken your life and have been willing to put it on the line to really, in your integrity, walk your talk. You did something quite similar in Tibet, in the children's village,
I did.
and adopted a child there. In
I
fact,
did.
our mutual friend Lodi said, well, when are you going to do what Goldie did? I said, wait.
Well, it is, you know, I mean, if I was younger, I would have them all living under my roof. However, I do believe that culture is very important.
Yes.
And when you take a child out of their culture, it's a responsibility to immerse them back into who they are, into their own sense of who they are and their DNA and their own cell memory, because they have it. It's vitally important in terms of their esteem and their tribal belonging, to know that they belong to a tribe.
Tell us the story of this little child that you adopted in the Tibetan children's village.
My little boy Tenzing?
Yes.
Tenzing, it was another interesting thing. I was there to see His Holiness, and I also took my son. We're the traveling troupe. And it was for some teachings and so forth. And I went up to the TCV and I saw the babies, okay? And one baby had just arrived the same day I did. And his name was Tenzing, and he was 14 months old. And he went over to Oliver and connected himself to my son. And he started playing with his camera. And he was 14, and he was absolutely brilliant. He was so unbelievable child. And then I would see him in his little jammies, and he walked over and he was looking at the mountains all covered with, and he was
a little
looking,
Buddha already.
He was, and he was gazing out over these mountains, and my heart, and he was a very serious child.
Yes.
So when I gave him a mala, which is a
prayer
beads, and I took it to him the next day, and he took them, and he treasured them so much that he would hide them behind his back when the other babies came. He didn't pull or shove, but he just gently hid them because he wanted to keep them, and then he broke them.
How fascinating.
And when they say when you break a mala, you're breaking your karma.
Yes.
And I knew then that this was my baby. So we sat down together and we had tea, and I slowly inched away. And he didn't see me leave because I couldn't bear to leave him on the day I had to go. And do you know that it's like he had eyes in the back of his head? I hid behind a house. He literally got up and walked just to where I was. He was following me, and he hadn't even seen me leave.
How did this start for you, that you put yourself out there, that you know, we all talk about these things, but that you were willing to do something about that you were willing to go to Peru, go to Tibet, help these children, create language as a curriculum?
Right.
How did this happen?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, we have to sort of look back on our lives and ask us how we became the person we are, and who is the person we want to become, you know.
But then be willing to do it.
And be willing to do it. I've always been brave that way. As I said, I'm very right brain. I follow my heart and my intuition, and then everything else follows. I love humanity. I love humanity. I'll never be turned off of the human heart. I know that it's there even in the worst of our so-called horrific enemies. I know that there lives inside of their hearts something to be connected to. So until proven otherwise, I suppose one of my ways of enjoying this life is to love and trust in the human spirit. So I suppose when I look at the world around us and I see how hard it is, how scary it is, and how some of us feel so uncertain about our future, that there are ways to make ourselves feel better, and that is to give, and that is to focus in on the things that we care about and the people that we love, and to be able to just share a little bit of our day, a little bit of our time.
So really, if we use curriculum to teach about our humanness, our humanity, then in a certain way we can meet where we are in history.
Right.
Because we're in a time where we have to have negotiation, and that would be empathy, and we have to have altruism, respect differences in other people's religions, and that would be conflict resolution. I mean, we could teach children with schools that had within them some form of spirit.
Yeah, this is so great. I love to hear you say this. I feel the same way. In fact, this is something that I was talking to another educator, actually. The other I was talking to was David Scott at the university. He's a chancellor at the University of Massachusetts. And he also feels the deep need for this kind of curriculum to be in schools. The dream here is to be able to create a dialogue, because again, schools are very polarized. We're not teaching our children how to relate, how to interconnect, and what their similarities are of spirit. And so my dream was, again, without sounding too ooey wooey, is to get the spirit, the human, the essence back in school. So, and I thought of a great idea the other day, which was there should be a class in role-playing.
Exactly.
What a fun class that would be. So, Johnny today gets to be dad, and what's her name? Mary gets to be mom.
Great.
And, Janet gets to be the little girl, and Tommy, whatever. And now you get a scenario. You get to work out in that class, which is a bit like drama.
Exactly.
You get to work out your different, you get to be able to be the mom. You get to identify what it must feel like to be a mother. Because what we don't do is interchange there's a practice, which is to say, how do I feel what you're feeling?
Exactly. The empathic process.
Exactly. And so to be able to put yourself in those shoes, saying, well, you've never walked in my shoes, blah, blah, blah. Well, let me walk in your shoes. I want to feel what you're feeling. Because only until we do will we be able to get a holistic view, to be able to look around all sides of the problem. To look flat on it. It's like, the earth is flat. Oh, really? Well, I guess I'll live with that concept. Or you get some brilliant person who says, no, I'm going to go around and see what's around on the other side. That's what it is to really resolve these kinds of situations. Holistic thinking. Just imagine your problem is a sphere. It's not a flat line. Your problem is a sphere. So you have to go around that sphere to look at all sides of that problem. And that's a great exercise. And you know what? Kids would have so much fun with it.
So much fun. And learn how to be people. How to get along with one another, so we could make peace, we could really teach peace and not war.
Kurt and I were talking about this the other day. Is it innate in the human to struggle, to fight, to disagree, to argue, to win? Is the competitive nature innate in human beings? And the answer, really, I think down the line is yes. So I don't think what we're talking about here, and we're certainly agreeing, is that we're trying to make a world where everything is like blissful and perfect, because you can't. You just can't. The striving for it is so brilliant. But what we need to do is to develop the tools to be able to put in our little toolbox that will allow us to
deal with who we are.
And the problem at hand.
Exactly. Self-discipline comes from that.
Right.
Options come from that. If I understand who you are, you understand how I am, and we're negotiating, then discipline comes in, because rather than being reactive, I can listen, step back, and be proactive. This is really a healthy model that we're starting to know.
Right. And it's doable.
It's doable.
Yeah, it's doable. I mean, the mind is malleable.
Yes.
You know, this is another thing that I'm learning in my Search of Joy project, is that the mind actually can change. So we do have the power to change our mind.
I do
Change
have
our little peptides.
I want to take you back for one moment to that search for joy. So now when you go to India, and you're going to go to Mother Teresa's City of Joy, and speak with the Prime Minister about all of these things.
And hopefully many Prime Ministers.
And many Prime Ministers. And in a sense, connect everyone consciously to something that we just know is there but don't really experience necessarily consciously.
We don't, because we don't have a discourse on joy.
And we're distracted by life.
That's right. And life and joy sometimes can meet. And so when you don't have a discourse for joy in your life, which is just a discussion of it, that you don't sort of look every day and ask yourself a couple times a day, how was that? How was that day? How am I doing today? Did I experience any joy today? By asking the question, it's starting to bubble up.
This is wonderful.
Do you know, I remember there's a man who used to become a friend of mine. He is a policeman for Port Authority, and he was down at Ground Hero, as he calls it, for quite a long time. And I met him down there when I went to visit. And we've emailed each other. And his name is Gary. He's a wonderful man. And I said to him, you know, I'm doing this documentary film, you know, extravaganza on joy. And what is your definition of joy? And he gave me his various definitions. One was the birth of his child. The other one was getting away in nature, where there were no sounds except birds and the smell of the trees, and all the senses were activated. And then he emailed me the next day and told me something else. And the beautiful thing is that he spent 2 days thinking about this.
Isn't that something, Goldie?
That's divine.
That's divine.
Yeah.
And you know, you must have had divine parents. I remember something about your father telling you once about, it's such a Buddhist idea, this ocean, and
he was amazing.
He was, tell us about that, because I'm just going to paraphrase it, and you know the whole story.
Right. Daddy was a great philosopher, and he also was a realist. The one reason why I was really able to keep my feet, other than the fact that I had a fabulous Jewish mother who said, you know, no bull ever. Tell it like it is. My father was not only a dreamer, but he was a philosopher, and one thing he said was always stay real. Don't believe what you're doing. Don't believe in what people review you as. Only believe in what you are and what you stand for. So the one great thing that he said to me is that when you start feeling a little too big for your britches, go out and stand by the ocean and feel how small you really are. Feel how a part of everything you are, and you are not the thing.
Boy, he was enlightened.
He was very enlightened. He was an enlightened being.
Well, you're a gift for all of us, and that is truly the gift of life. And you've made so much, you've mentored so many, and contributed to all around the world, to all of us, as a way of connecting us and bringing to our minds and reminding us what it is to be a human being. Thank you, Goldie.
Thank you so much.
The point is for all of us to build a sense of self and a sense of community. Joy is the secret of life, and Goldie, you are a joy. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I'm Dr. Gail Gross. Thanks for joining us.